As if anybody cares. We can agree that broke man propaganda is not going to work for the girlies with a sense of dignity and a brain in 2025. I love that for us. I appreciate that for us. Hopefully, we see less of that in books, films, television shows, plays, anything else. I doubt it, but a girl can dream. Now, you may be wondering, well, instead of a broke man and a rich woman falling in love, what if a broke woman and a rich man fall in love? Is it any better for the woman? Does it provide more benefits for her? Does it change anything? Is it any different? I'm here to tell you no, no, no. First and foremost, we need to get this out of the way. The two tropes are not written in the same way whatsoever. Every time I look at broke boy propaganda versus rich boy propaganda, I usually am looking at two very different stories. I wouldn't say two very different stories, but it's still dramatically different where you're not comparing apples to apples. You simply are not. And it's solely because the woman still is the one that has to pay the heavier price. Maybe not financially, but she still has to conduct more of the emotional labor. She still is the one that has to do more work when it comes to fixing the man, coddling him and fighting off all the pretentious in-laws and everyone else giving her the evil eye and all the odds being against her favor, Or she just has to throw her hands up and love him anyways. The man, he still barely has to do anything. He still has to rely on her to catalyze his character development, if and only if he has any. In general, compared to broke boy propaganda, when it comes to rich boy propaganda, the woman or the girl is generally not even like street rat poor. I have yet to see a rich boy broke girl story where the woman is basically like living Aladdin style, like rag poor. She's usually just lower to middle class, like standard working class. I think of a Cinderella story, a standard like medieval Cinderella. Like, yes, she was poor, but she wasn't necessarily like out in the slums, okay? Like, she still had a home, clothes, food, a roof over her head. I'm not saying that it was any good conditions whatsoever. She had, like, very emotionally and verbally abusive step parents and stepsisters. I'm not saying that whatsoever. It's just that, like, you would never see the female counterpart of Aladdin. You just wouldn't. The man, when it comes to like rich boy propaganda, the only reason he's like so far apart is that he's old money, a literal billionaire, or he's an actual prince or a king. So automatically that just others her, I also think of Crazy Rich Asians where Rachel Chu is an economics professor. Like in any other setting, she would, be considered like, someone who is of a relatively like decent standard tax bracket. I still think professors deserve to be paid so much more for the labor that they do. And in all fairness, Nick was a history professor at the same school. It wasn't until like a year in their relationship, when she found out that, he's, like Singaporean old money, generational wealth where they, wouldn't have to work a day in their lives. Rich, wealthy. Absolutely wild, That essentially conveys to me that the barometer for where women can simply start is just so much higher than where men start. I look at some of these broke man propaganda. These guys usually are just struggling when it comes to their finances. or they're literally homeless crawling out of the sewers. And they sometimes look like it too. And you're trying to convince me that that's desirable? Are we being serious right now? And don't even get me started on all the ways the woman has to pay her way out of her problems, most of the time on her own. She has to go through a physical metamorphosis because she's never allowed to look poor by the end of the movie. She just simply isn't. And we can see this play into the ugly duckling syndrome trope, where in order for a woman's character development to be meaningful, or at least to be seemingly poignant, she has to conform to the beauty standards. She has to look the part. This would be more compelling if it genuinely was coming from, a, like a authentic place to her in her heart. But usually it's not. Usually it's her ticket into getting into the rich guy's world in the first place so that she can fit in, she can blend in. She, has to release a part of herself because she needs to attain this man. I just simply don't see this with broke men. And by default, the rich man, because he's rich, he's already perfect. He's already flawless. He doesn't need to change anything about himself. The vast majority of the time, the character development for the rich guy is so minuscule. If any of you have watched the K-drama Boys Over Flowers, you will know. Gu Junpyo, the leader of F4, who happens to be super, super, super rich, remained a menace to society throughout the entire K-drama. He still somehow got the girl. Gum Jendi, the poor girl in question, I mean, to be fair, like, she was considered really poor in the manga, but in the K-drama, her family just owned a laundromat, so she was technically, like, lower middle class or working class. And she was a swimming prodigy. She needs to be, and I'm not just talking about Gum Jendi, I'm talking about, like, every female protagonist who happens to be poor. She needs to be a prodigy. She needs to be so skilled at something, or she needs to have something where she stands out so much from the rest, or like whether it's her natural beauty, or whether she's super smart or super good at what she does, like in her job, or she has a special talent that makes her not like the other girls. Not like the other girls. And yet, it was her that was forced to love this absolute monster of a man anyways, because he's rich, because he's decently good looking. I will always remember Boys Over Flowers as, I don't even want to get into it, but oh my god, what a horrific example of a romance. I'm running out of time, but I can go on about this forever. It's just, I swear to God, it's always the woman that has to pay the heavier price. It always costs her more. And then with romances, whether the man is broke or filthy rich, he almost has to do absolutely nothing. And it's annoying.